I'll make it down there.
It's been a long time since I worked at a restaurant here.
Wow, hi everybody. How's this volume? We did a little sound check. It's too late. I'll stand back a little bit. I have no idea what I'm doing here. I've never done this before. This whole experience is obviously new, but sincerely, everybody here is special in somehow bringing this book in all its forms to fruition. We have some people that really participated in making it an actual thing, and the rest of you were invited because of your interest. You had great questions. Some of you read earlier drafts of the book. You really expressed that it meant something to you other than that you just read my book. And I appreciate everybody that just read my book, but all you folks here who really read my book, and I'm just so grateful for that. I had no expectation when I started writing it, or when I brought it to fruition, that it would have the impact that it seems to be having. It was a way for me to express really to my family, and sadly only my two siblings that are left of my family are here today to enjoy this. My mom and dad are passed, my brother is passed, and the sad thing is they never will or got a chance to hear about this. As you know, I was never allowed to talk about what had happened, and I honor that. And I think those of you that know me on a little bit of a deeper level know that I'm a man of my word. And I kept my mouth shut. This girl here, wow. The look on her face when she realized what I was talking about really showed the love that she has for me and the acceptance. You know, it could be pretty hard to hear that your husband, among other things, has killed a bunch of people. And that was a thing that was really worried. I really was going to minimize that and maybe completely keep myself out of it as I wrote the book, but I really wanted it to be real, and the emotions that I had at those times were severe. I mean, it's a hard thing to do, to look a man in the eye and kill him. I mean, you can't say anything about that. That's not true. That's very hard. I don't really regret any of that. But it doesn't sit easy. It's a tough thing to do. I hope none of you ever have to face that. And if you do, save your life, that's all I can say. And that's really what got me through. It's either me or him. I did the best I could. And I obviously was successful. I do want to introduce a couple people that I mentioned earlier. First, when I was writing the book, I knew I had a pretty good grip on my command of the language and English and writing. I spent my whole life writing technical reports and technical books. And as I wrote it, I was pretty confident in it. And I first started sending it out to publishers. And one of the comments I had is that you have to have an editor really look at this. And you know, I perhaps naively thought that they would see beyond that. That's something I knew. I mean, I know I'm not perfect. I hope they would do that for me, but they wouldn't. And that was one of the comments. So I got to thinking, okay, I need an editor. I can suck that up. That's not a problem. And I asked around, and I happened to be talking to some bandmates. You all know I play music. I'm in a bunch of bands. And John and Sarah from Northern Born said, you know, you played music with our girl Deena once, and she's an editor. And I'm like, Deena? Okay. She's really friendly, and we played music, and we didn't really get a chance to talk much because we were playing music, but I liked her. And so I gave her a call, told her what was going on, and she agreed to take it on. And at first I was like, maybe not cocky, but I was confident that I had a pretty good grip on things. So I only sent her a couple random chapters, not even necessarily in order. And I'm talking hours, not even a day later, she came back with just this expression in her voice of awe of what I had given her. And yeah, she had some good technical comments, and I took them to heart and of course fixed them up. And then as I got to thinking more, I'm like, you know, she was very, very valuable, just those comments on a couple random chapters that I had sent her. And so I called her again and said, hey, let's just do the entire book. It might take some more time, but do you have the time? And she was like, yep. So, and of course, as I said, I had already had the whole thing written, so it was kind of easy enough to send her via email. How wonderful is that? And she could read it, and she could type right on the draft and email it back to me, and she was prompt all the time. I mean, literally within a day or two, constantly throughout the whole book. And some of the chapters, as you know, are pretty long, some are pretty short. Some are maybe kind of fluffy and humorous and not much going on, and some are very, very intense. We got to be just talking back and forth either on phone or emails, and she really sunk it into my head that I had something really solid here. And Deena, I appreciate that so much. Your confidence in what I had done, and your graciousness in telling me this is wrong, you gotta fix this, and here and there. It wasn't a lot of errors, let's say, but enough that made me realize how valuable her help would be. So thanks so much, Deena. You did a great job. The next task was, you know, I'm an artist, I guess, in the sense that I play music, but you know, how do you translate that to drawing the cover of your book? I mean, you don't. And I get it, maybe you don't judge a book by its cover, but damn, I found out a way to make that happen. I know you probably all can't see this, but this is the original sketch that I had for the book. And you can check, or I'll pass it around maybe. It's a crappy hand-drawn sketch with some handwritten notes on it. And then after a couple of months, I got this back. And wow, there's not one person who has said, I would buy that for the book alone, for the cover alone. This was all done by my very good friend Mike DuBois, sitting right here up from Woodstock. I know I promote Mike at every chance possible, and I'm going to do that again. Mike does art for all your favorite bands. I'm talking Dead and Company, Grateful Dead, Warren Haynes, Dave Mason. The list is practically endless. Any poster or t-shirt you see at a concert, there's a reasonable chance Mike did that. He's done the sound, the stage art for big concerts. You've probably been at a concert and seen his art and not realize it, but this dude is a very amazing artist, a really good friend for many years. We love to mountain bike together. We love to crash into things, get up, bleeding or not. He's been a great, great friend, and again, I'm honored that he said yes to this. He didn't need this. He's got all the work he wants, but I love him, he loves me. He did this for me, and I'm so grateful for that. The impact that the cover makes, I know draws people to the book. And if I can get them to read the back of the cover as well, that's really helping people decide if this is a book for them or not. I'm sure people have looked at it and said no, and I'm okay with that, obviously. But every place I've been where I've got the book, the cover just draws people's attention and admiration. And Mike, thank you so much. Okay, so then we moved on. The book came out right at the beginning of January of this year. And, you know, it would have been nice to sit back and, you know, revel in my good feelings. And I certainly did for a while. And then I'm like, well, what's next? And what is next? Well, I got it on Kindle and I got it on paperback, and it was a sense of, wow, I've accomplished my goal. And then I'm like, duh, you gotta have an audio book. What do I know about audiobooks? Well, I listen to a lot of them. And so I go on YouTube, and yeah, people talk about you gotta get a microphone, and you gotta kick the kids into the garage, or you gotta do it in your cellar. And you know, you gotta have the microphone right here, and you gotta have your script all handy, and they suggested making sure you print it in big font, so you can read it. And I'm like, okay, cool. And I'm toying around with that, and I got microphones, and I'm listening to myself, and I make some mock recordings, and I'm like, that's not gonna cut it. So I'm thinking about, you know, what can I do? And of course, I'm always feeling local. You can put this out on the internet and get 1,000 quotes for book art. You can get 1 million quotes for editing. You know, I love our little artist community, and I was very happy to, you know, hopefully keep all that work local. So I'm thinking, and I'm like, again, light goes off. I recorded on Miss Deb Cavan, one of Deb Cavanaugh's albums, honored to be on one of her albums, at her partner Joel's sound studio right here in Petersburg. And I'm like, yeah, Joel probably, if he can't do it, he probably knows somebody. So I called Joel up, and we have this discussion, and we go over and meet, and we do a few mock-up recordings. And all of a sudden, like, whoa, it's way different than what it sounded like on my phone. You know, he's got $3,000 microphones and totally silent studio and just totally professional stuff. So, you know, we made an arrangement, and we went, I probably should have calculated this, but I think in the neighborhood of 10 weeks, I went once a week for 2 to 4 hours, tucked away in the studio. Joel's behind a glass panel. That is all this was done on computer with a DAW, Digital Audio Workshop. And I'm not really a big talker in general, and even right now, I'm about done talking. But, you know, I got a mission here on doing the book, so I kind of toughed it out. For preparing for this, I had Robin mostly print the entire book at a really large font, because I'm half blind up close. And I did a couple mock-ups, and I'm reading it, and I'm like, as those of you that have read it know, there's a lot of different voices and characters in the book and accents. And I'm like, that doesn't sound right. And then I got it and realized, dude, learn their accents. Learn what, you know, take what you wrote and talk it. And that was a kind of a light bulb moment. And when I started doing that, now the book is starting to go, yeah, this is sounding like what it really would have sounded like. So that was like a light bulb moment. And then we had the little task of, in the book, whenever I'm thinking, it's in italics. And that makes it easy to distinguish if I'm thinking or speaking. And that didn't work right in the audio version, because you can't tell the difference. Joel had the brilliant idea, and he went back and he put that little bit of, I'm calling it reverb, he may have a more technical name for it, but and he's going to talk about this later, so I'm going to be a little bit brief on this, but he had the idea for that sound effect. So you as the listener know that you're hearing my thoughts as opposed to hearing me speaking. That was awesome. Then we had the idea of maybe we need to break in a little, maybe music or sound, and we had the idea of maybe having jungle sounds going on in the background while we're in the jungle, which would have been cool, but we nixed that. We thought maybe that could be distracting. But we kept playing with it, and we had the idea, and perhaps it was my idea, I'm not sure, but as many of you know, I do play bass guitar. Someday I hope to be adequate at it, but I'm adequate enough that we brought my guitar into the studio, plugged it in, sat down, and all I did was boom, 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 stop. And he recorded literally a half hour of all these little riffs. And we named them happy, sad, violent, all these cues that he could use. So Joel went back patiently, and as you know, they're at the beginning of every chapter and at every scene break, Joel found the appropriate sound for what was about to happen, and he stuck it in there with the voodoo that he does on the computer. I think that was a great thing. I never heard that in an audiobook before. Not that I've listened to millions, but I've listened to a lot, and that was I thought, a great concept that we teamed up and were able to figure that out. The other cool part was when we're blowing up the camps and the explosions are happening, I was able to, in the printed form, bring to the reader's attention that I was having a hard time hearing. And, you know, when I wrote that, you know, the voices are in and out. You can't hear it. How do we do that? Well, we did that purposely. You know, I spoke it that way in the book, but Joel had the idea of, you get that ringing in your ears around these explosions. And he stuck that in there. And if you pay attention, right after the explosion, the sound is higher. And as my hearing comes back, it gets lower until it fades right out. That was an awesome, again, piece of voodoo. And then Jean Tansey invited me to participate in an art opening where she had, you know, artists, and she had the man sitting in the back there next to Jean, John Cehowski, as a musician. And I'm there promoting and signing books and talking to people, and it was cool. And John's might have sang a song or two, and I was paying attention, and I know John for years, and I know all the songs, and he starts playing this other one that I'd never heard of, so my ears pricked up a little bit, and he started singing, and wow, the lyrics of that song, which are about child abuse, really cut me, you know, really deep, and my jaw just dropped, and I just could not get unriveted on this song that John was singing. And it, you know, it really affected me. I teared up a little bit, and kind of, okay, it ended, and, you know, I was in awe of that. And the event ended, and I go home, and I'm, you know, working on the book, on the audio book at this point, and the end's in sight. We're somewhere in the late 20th chapter. Excuse me. But that song is in the back of my mind. It's about child abuse. The whole end of the book is about child abuse. Can you put a song in an audio book? I've never heard that before. Why not? So I talked to Joel about it. He goes, yeah, I can absolutely do that. I called John and asked him if I could get him to do that for me. And he pretty much immediately was like, yeah, I'll do that for you. So the plan was just to come to the studio, Joel's studio, and just see what it sounded like. John's pretty pro. He nailed the lyrics, I think, on his second, what do you call it? Take, yeah, thank you. And then the piano, he nailed in 1 or 2 takes. And then Joel had a good idea to add the violin sound, which was done on a MIDI through the keyboard. So we got piano, violins, and John singing. Now the question is, where do we put this? And you know, it just turned out that where we put it was at the end of the last chapter. And I know, you know, some of you haven't listened to the book, and obviously it's not in the book. But right as I'm speaking, the last 2 or 3 sentences, there's just this little prelude of the keyboard that just like allows the listener to transition from, he's been speaking and now this music's playing, what's going on? So I hoped at that point people would and think it's the end of the book and tune out. And having that overlap of the music over or under while I'm talking, I think was a great idea. I'm not sure which one of us thought of that, but that was the spot, perfect spot for that song. And boy, if I haven't made you cry near the end of the book already, and you can listen to John's song and not cry, you're more hard-hearted than I am, that's for sure. So, John, thank you. That was an amazing piece of work. So, what I'd like to do is, it's popular that authors do readings. Many of you know that I've done, I'm not even sure, 15 or 20 readings from the book. Almost all of them at Gene and Matt's. Where's Matt?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Gene and Matt hold a monthly all-original open mic. In other words, you can't do cover songs. It's got to be all original work. And I go, and I don't even play, but I like original music, and I'm a fan of music, and I kept going. And one night, a guy was there, and he read a poem. And I'm like, oh, that was cool too. And again, another one of those, wait a minute. Hey, Gene, could I read something out of my book? She's like, yeah. I'm like, okay, all right. So, how do you do that? You only got like 15, 20 minutes. It was hard to say, I'm going to read a whole chapter because they're generally too long. But after a little bit of thinking about it, I got out my copies that I had made for the audiobook in the huge print to make it easier to read. You think the book's long. This is just an aside. I have 5 3-inch binders of the printed book at size 17 font.
Yay, Robin.
So, and then what I realized is, well, I want to do all the accents and the voices too. So I meticulously went through, every time I was going to do a reading, I would go through with a highlighter, and I would assign, Sarge's voice is yellow, and Roma's voice is orange, and blah, blah. Well, I've actually went out and bought highlighters of every possible color. So I went through and I made a list of every character that had a speaking role, which turned out to be 36. And I highlighted the dialogue, and I hand wrote a little note that would remind me of what that person sounded like. Southern, Caribbean, old guy, scratchy voice, dark voice. And I practiced all these. So when I got to Joel's, I had that plan already in mind. Fortunately, because I would hate to have gone back and had to redub all these, all these characters' voices. So that was a stroke of luck that I did that first. So that's how all the voices came about. There's 36 different voices, or mostly different. I tried to tweak them all a little bit. I had a list. I had I characterized each person's voice, and I was able to pull that off. So what I'd like to do right now is I'm going to read a little bit out of the first chapter, Crooking a Deer. And this is, just a brief. I don't want to take up all the time, but this is going to be, I'm not sure, 10 minutes or so, just to have a taste of crooking a deer. Now, crooking a deer, as you know, became a metaphor throughout the entire book, if not my entire life, of facing an impossible task. And, you might fail, but do the best you can. And that's not any magic advice. I'm sure we all know and try to live our lives by that to some degree. But that's what crooking a deer is about. Finding an impossible task, doing the best you can to get vile way possible, but I did, and I had the satisfaction of that. It was amazing. Grandpa replied, "You can't go hunting till you've cooked a deer." Huh? What's that? I took off my glasses and mindlessly cleaned them with the bottom of a t-shirt that I had taken from under my red plaid wool jacket. I realized everyone had eyeglasses. I could see the fire's reflections in all of them. Joel loves that line. Uncle Tom butted in, wagging his three-fingered left hand, a victim of a tannerite accident many years ago. "Yeah, you have to crook a deer before you can shoot one. That's the manly way to hunt." Grandpa cut in. "You need to go out tonight. You have to find a deer. Make your way up to the back side of it. Sneak up on it really quiet like. Get right up to its ass. When you're there, lift the tail up with your left hand and jam your right index finger up its ass. Then crook it." He demonstrated turning his index finger at a right angle at the middle knuckle, like he was shooting a pistol. "So it can't run away." He paused to let that sink in, and then continued. "After a few seconds, let the deer go. Come back here, and let us smell your finger, so we know you did it or not. Then you're a man, and you can shoot a deer with a rifle. And don't stick your finger up your own ass. A deer smells different, we'll know." I was stunned. I've never heard of that before. Everyone had a serious face. They were looking at me intently. I can do that. I took a flashlight and one of the rolls of orange tape. Discreetly, I eased my way out of camp and was walking, calling out to no one in particular. "I'm gonna take a crap and go crook a deer. Be back in the morning with a stinky finger for you all." My dad, along with everyone, laughed, and he said, "Good luck with that one, boy." He did not take me seriously. Mr. Wigstead chimed in. "That boy sure shits a lot." I spent the entire partially moonlit night walking around the woods, referencing the moon for directions, watching landscape items, rocks, trees, ravines, hilltops, and so on. I got sidetracked a few times, but kept finding my way back to landmarks by using the orange tape around trees. I never saw a deer. I returned to the camp as the sun was beginning to break. My dad and grandpa were cooking bacon and coffee in the fire pit. They looked at me. I was disheveled, damp, and tired. "Where the hell you been all night? We were worried about you. We were just about to go get a forest ranger," Grandpa chirped with a wry smile. "Trying to cook a deer. Couldn't find one," I said. My dad and Grandpa practically fell over laughing, calling out to others to come see the heroic hunter. After a few minutes of laughing and ball-busting mockery, they let me in on the joke. Uncle Tom said derisively, "No one can sneak up on a deer and stick their finger in its ass and catch it that way, you dumbass." So that's where I learned about cooking a deer. That is actually a true story. The whole hunting incident, as best as I can remember, was a true story. The man in the bar that we stopped at is actually a real person. I didn't use his real name because of possible copyright information. He's dead and buried long ago, but that guy was cool too. It was a fun thing. And it was the first time I ever got to shoot a rifle, certainly not a pistol at that point, but a rifle. And right at the very end, I comment that I'm beginning to become a man. That was a very important lesson, a great weekend. I'll remember the gist of it my entire life. And I thank all those guys. Was it embarrassing and humiliating and terrifying that they played that joke on me? Yes, it was. But that's the way life is. That happens the rest of your life. I got it twice that once I got in with them on the mission, those guys busted me nonstop. But I was used to that by now and ready for that. And that never really bothered me. This bothered me the first time for a week or two because of the embarrassment. But I thank those guys that they did that to me. That was awesome of them. All right, thank you so much for that. Let's just take a quick moment break here. I'm going to ask Deena to come up next, and Deena's going to, maybe reiterate a few things that I said, and hopefully throw out another gem that you might like.
Can I take a few minutes? Or?
Yeah, no, just come on up and.
Oh, okay. I need to take a break.